What does all of this have in common? We have string lights, crystals, one branch, two branch, oop, the thread is not part of it, and some craft paint. It's a chandelier. I know that makes absolutely no sense, but I had this idea to turn a branch, which I had to buy a plastic branch because a real branch would have been way too flimsy and like breakable, paint it silver, which I've already done. See, it's all ooh, shiny. And then attach string lights, like fairy lights, leaves, and then have a bunch of sparkly crystals dangling off the bottom, and then basically have it like on string attached to a chain that attaches to the ceiling. So it's like a sort of apartment friendly chandelier because you only have to make one hole. And it's just one of those like little ceiling screw things. But yeah, and I think I only spent like $50 on all of this, so you know, but yeah, branchelier. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. The first thing I have to do is going to be painting the leaves. I want them to be kind of metallic, and right now they're just green. So I'm going for like a enchanted forest made out of gemstones kind of vibe here. Water the stone. Okay, instead of painting them on, I'm just gonna dip them, I think. So I'm gonna just do this. And that way the backs too. So at this point I realized that the leaves, like the backs, the stems on the backs, were going to be a green or even a slightly brown against the silver of the branch. So I realized that I needed to take non-diluted silver paint and paint the stems. And I'm using the same Deco Art Metallic silver paint that I used for the leaves, just as I said, not diluted with water this time. Next up, it was time to make the crystal drops. I did a couple of test ones and found that the core that I initially was using was a little too thick, so I switched to a finer one, which is a 0.25 millimeter gauge cord, and it worked a lot better. The initial one was too stiff and inflexible, and I had to use crimp beads to get the crystal beads to stay where I wanted them to, and I had to use them like sandwiching each bead, and I really didn't like how that looked. These were the two styles of crystal drop that I came up with. So we've got a teardrop followed by a bicone and then a round and another bicone. and then capped off with a loop created using a single crimp bead. Then I have my second design, which starts with a small bicone, a round, a medium bicone, and then another round followed by the same crimp bead and loop technique as the first. These give the kind of suspended like raindrop style that I'm going for. I may make more of these, or I may make another design later, but we'll see. I'm going to start off making 9 total of each design, and then I'll go from there. And I do think I'm going to make the distance between the beads on the crystal drop one a little bit longer than this, probably more like 1.5 inches versus the inch on the one that is mostly round beads, because I want to have a nice staggered effect when it's hanging off the branch. Right now these are just a little too even with each other and I don't want them just creating like a straight line. So I'm going to cut 9 of this cord to the correct lengths. First I have to measure that. So I'm going to measure the length of each drop, multiply it by 4, because I have to double the cord going through each. And then I also have to loop the cord through each bead that's going to act as kind of a stopper, so that it doesn't slide around too much, or at all preferably. And then I also have to create the loop at the end. So this first one is 3.5 inches. And the crystal teardrop is like 3 3/4 of an inch, but that's on that initial design one. So I'm actually going to increase the length of it so that we have more space between each. So I'm going to make that more like 4 inches and multiply that. Initially I was going to do by 3. I ended up doing it by times 4 though, because there just wasn't enough cord when I did it times 3 for either design. So I cut 9 14-inch long cords, and then I cut 9 16-inch long cords to make the longer drop. Okay, so this first design is going to use 1 tiny bicone, 1 larger bicone, 2 rounds, and then of course 1 crimp bead. So I'm just going to thread my tiny bicone onto my strand of cord first and kind of shuffle it to the middle. And then next I'm going to feed both of those ends through one of my round beads. And then I have to loop the end of the cord back through that round bead to kind of stop it from shifting. I realized about halfway through this project that I needed to be looping both of the cord strands back through the bead, and I started doing that about halfway through. So some of these do shift a little bit more than others, but I think because it's not like going to be handled ever, it's just going to be hanging off the ceiling, that it will be fine. And then I'm going to thread my next bicone onto the cord, about 1 inch away from the first. So next I'm just getting that larger bicone bead onto my cord and looping my cord back through it, pulling that taut. Then I'm going to do the same thing with my last bead, about 1 inch apart from the neck, like the middle one. And then I'm going to feed my crimp bead onto my cords and then create a loop and feed it back through both the crimp bead and my top crystal bead. And then I'm going to use a crimper tool that I have to crimp the bead down and then trim the excess below the first bead where it's coming out. So I'm just going to proceed to go ahead and make a total of 9 of these. and they're already so sparkly. Next up, I am just going to cut the cords for my second drop style, which is the teardrop one. And I can't shove the bicone above the teardrop too close to it, because otherwise it causes it to kind of hang sideways on the cord. So I fed the teardrop on, I fed the bicone on, and then I'm going to loop my cord back through the bicone. And then I'm going to feed on my round. And I'm going to settle these about 1.5 inches apart. And feed that back through. And then we're just going to feed this last bicone bead on, pull the cord through, and then I'm going to feed my crimp bead on, create the loop, and crimp it, just like I did with the other one. Okay, so I have all of my little teardrops done. I have 9 of each kind. I initially was only going to do 2 different designs, but I realized that partway through, A, there wasn't going to be enough of them in my opinion, and B, I wanted a little bit like a third length. So we have my original, we have my middle one, and we have the longest, which has also the most beads on it. So I have 9 of each. They're very sparkly. So I'm going to go ahead and start attaching my lights to the branch. And once I'm done with that, then I'm going to attach the leaves, and very last are the crystal drops. So I have the branch all lit up. It puts off a decent amount of light. This is meant to be more of like an aesthetic accent light rather than something to actually light a room, so it doesn't need to be that bright. So next step is attach all of my sparkly silver leaves and then the crystals. We've got a leaf, and we've got a little nub of a branch, and this is all I'm doing for most of these, is just attaching it. So we have 1 leaf. Okay, I've got my leaves on. I don't have that many, but I wanted the main feature to be the branch and my sparkly little crystals, so I'm going to go ahead and attach those. But so far, this is what we've got. It's like a little gentle spring branch. Okay, so we're going to start with the short ones. And I'm just going to start attaching this every, let's say, 3 inches. Starting at the fork, just with a piece of floral wire. Just with a piece of wire, it's not even floral wire. This is just like super lightweight. Okay, so I'm using this as sort of a little balancing thing. Just cutting a short piece of wire. This is really light, like 30 gauge wire, so. So I've got one here, so I'm gonna put one here. So let's start by putting this through the loop. And then just attach it. Okay. So we've already got that kind of going on. So I'm just going to keep attaching these, and the next time you see me, the brancholier will be done.